Thanks, everybody, for being here. I'm Senator Alyssa Slotkin from the great state of Michigan, and we are here to introduce the Protect Our Polls Act. What this bill does, essentially, is shut off avenues that President Trump can use to send our military in uniform or federal law enforcement to intervene in our elections. I want to thank my colleagues who are behind me, Senator Padilla, who heads up a lot of our election work, but then Senators Baldwin, Gallego, Kelly, and Klobuchar, who aren't here, Rosen, Warnock. We made the decision to include as original co-sponsors those of us from swing states, from states that have been targeted for our voter rolls, for states that are right now being sued by the Trump administration for our voter rolls, and where President Trump has shown a bit of an oppressive or obsessive focus on our elections in particular. It's an important signal that we're doing this together. For some of us, we've already seen this movie, and I think we were debating, I think all of us were here on January 6, 2021. So just to review the bidding, and why this bill has come together now. In May of 2020, so months and months before the 2020 elections, Trump was already talking about his lack of confidence and fraud in the upcoming 2020 elections. He said for the first time in May of 2020 that if he didn't win in 2020, then the elections were rigged. And members of Congress, members of the House and the Senate, wrote strongly worded letters. We said things on TV. But to be honest, I think we had a failure of imagination to really understand what this president would do in reality. Obviously, he lost in 2020. And the next thing we all knew, we were here on January 6th, many of us on the floor of the House, on the floor of the Senate, and in the case of myself, barricading myself in my office because of the attack on the Capitol. So I think, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. And what we have done today is an attempt to try and curtail the president's ability to send uniformed military or federal law enforcement to our polls. In the last 6 months alone, the president has said that the 2020 elections were rigged over 100 times, including just this week. In the State of the Union, where we were all sitting on the House floor, he said again, if my side doesn't win in November of 26, then the elections were rigged. Back in 2020, I will take note, he drafted an executive order that called on the National Guard to seize ballots and voting machines in purple states, including the state of Michigan. He did not sign that executive order, but in January of this year, regretted that he didn't sign that executive order. He told a journalist, I wish I had sent in the uniformed military to collect ballots back in 2020. He's demanding the voter rolls for over 30 states, including the state of Michigan. And then just recently is trying to change the laws of the U.S. Postal Service and ban voting by mail in states that refuse to hand over their voting rolls. He is trying to nationalize the elections, and he is telling us in his own words what he's trying to do. On top of that, Trump's nominees for his cabinet positions have come up here and refused to rule out uniformed military or federal law enforcement being sent to the polls on Election Day. I personally have asked 5 different cabinet officials whether they would rule this out, whether it was okay to deploy the uniformed military or federal law enforcement to our polls, from Secretary Hegseth to Secretary Mullen. None of them would unilaterally rule it out. So instead of waiting to see what happens in 2020, we are trying to take some action here. So we're introducing Protect Our Polls Act, and it does 3 big things. Number one, it requires that President Trump come to Congress to get approval before he would ever deploy uniformed military to our polls. There is only one legal way to send uniformed military to the polls on our books, and that is to, quote, repel armed enemies of the United States. We have never done this in our history, not during World War II when we were in the middle of combat operations, not just months after 9/11 when we had been attacked on our own soil. We have never in our history sent uniformed military into our polls during an election. So if Trump wants to do that and use this narrow exception, he should be able to come to Congress and seek our approval to do that. Number two, it cuts off any funding for the uniformed military or federal law enforcement to seize ballots or voting machines. It is already illegal for uniformed military to touch and seize ballots and voting machines. It breaks the chain of custody and therefore threatens the enfranchisement of those voters. It makes it easier to have those votes thrown out. It is illegal right now. And we want to make sure that that is reinforced in law and that not a single taxpayer dollar can be used in any of that illegal activity. And then number 3, this bill protects our service members from illegal orders. If Trump goes ahead and tries to send our uniformed military to collect votes, to collect voting machines, this bill is meant to protect them from that illegal order, which has obviously been a big thing for me, Senator Kelly, and others. So what this comes down to is Congress trying to make it impossible for the president to steal an election. Now, the reason we're doing this today, and I'm happy to talk about it once I hand it over to the team, and not doing this in any other body or in a bipartisan way, I actually tried 3 different times through the NDAA amendment process to bring up versions of this bill. We tried, and on a party line vote, all 3 of those amendments failed just last week in the NDAA markup. So we're here doing this as swing states because we think the most important thing we need to do as senators is protect our polls, protect our democracy in this election year. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Senator Slotkin, for your leadership on this. I want to take a moment to underscore why this legislation is so necessary. For a year and a half, we've seen President Trump use and abuse the full force of the federal government to get what he wants. We've seen him deploy thousands of federal agents like ICE and the National Guard troops to create chaos in American cities across this country. We've also seen President Trump undermine our free and fair elections. He continues to call into question the 2020 election, which he lost fair and square. In Wisconsin, President Trump has sent the FBI to question election officials and police officers in Milwaukee, despite a recount that declared him the loser nearly 6 years ago. And by the way, this deployment of the FBI for these interviews has been quite recent. Trump is sending an unmistakable message. Beware to anyone who gets in his way or tries to give him results that he doesn't like. That brings us to this November, when tens of millions of Americans will head to the polls to cast their ballots. The president is afraid that accountability is coming. He is showing it. If things don't go his way, he is already laying the groundwork so that he can claim fraud and cheating, the kind that only exists when his party loses. President Trump is also trying to stop Americans from being able to get to the ballot box, including repeatedly threatening to deploy federal troops to polling places. Yes, sending federal armed agents to your local schools, churches, fire stations, and other polling places. Just this weekend, Homeland Security Secretary Mullen said that he wouldn't rule out having ICE at the polls. We cannot allow that to happen. And that is why I am so proud to introduce the Protect Our Polls Act alongside Senator Slotkin to stop this president from sending federal troops or armed agents into our polling places. Americans want to be able to vote freely without Donald Trump sending in armed troops to stop them. The only reason for the military to be at our polling places is intimidation. The only result will be stopping eligible and legal voters from showing up and having their voices heard. We all agree that our democracy works best when more Americans participate. Congress must step up and work to protect Americans' rights to show up to the ballot box and have their voices heard. That starts by stopping President Trump from using the U.S. military and federal agents to intimidate eligible voters. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Senator Padilla.
Thank you, Senator Baldwin. Thank you, Senator Slotkin, for organizing us and leading us in this important effort. Before I get into my prepared remarks, just 2 points of clarification. Number one, I'm the only member up here who was not here in the Capitol on January 6th. My appointment to succeed Vice President Harris had been announced, so I was at home in Los Angeles working on transition, watching with my kids the developments of January 6th unfold and having to answer the question to them. Dad, really? That's where we're going? Yes. We choose to come, we choose to serve because we care about our democracy and we will defend it. The other point of clarification is breaking news. California is not a swing state. But that hasn't kept President Trump from attacking California at every turn, including but not limited to the integrity of our elections, which brings me to the point of today. So let's be clear right from the start. The right to vote includes the right for citizens to be able to cast their ballot free from harassment, free from threats, and free from intimidation. There is no place at our polling sites for federal troops or federal law enforcement, including ICE. Their deployment to intimidate eligible voters is already against the law. And it's been the law of the land for a long time now, dating back to the Civil War. The law could not be clearer. But we know that Donald Trump and his administration does not have respect or appreciation for the rule of law, which is why we need to pass the Protect Our Polls Act, so Congress can stop any attempts by the president to use federal forces to intimidate voters or interfere with our elections. And no, folks, this is not a hypothetical concern. Trump has been clear that he expects the next DNI to continue investigating the big lie. Just imagine what Bill Pulte might do with sensitive information at his fingertips, whether it's attacking opponents or finding new dangerous ways to advance Donald Trump's conspiracy theories and efforts to, quote, take over elections. Now, after the 2020 election, Donald Trump did indeed want to send troops to polling places to seize voting machines. And as you've heard recently, he's publicly said that he regrets not doing it. This is not a hypothetical. Trump former advisor Steve Bannon has publicly declared, quote, "You're damn right, we're going to have ICE surround the polls come November." And every time Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Mullen are asked about sending federal troops to election sites, we hear a lot of hemming and hawing. We hear a lot of dodging and deflecting, but they leave the door open to the possibility, and we need to slam it shut. Every American and every member of Congress should be concerned because it's clear what they're doing. Justify the presence of federal agents at polling places around the country. And let's not pretend for a second that this has anything to do with election security. Because first, it is already illegal for non-citizens to vote in federal elections. And second, despite years of conspiracy theories from Trump and his allies, there is zero evidence of massive voter fraud. So this is not about election security, it's about intimidation, plain and simple. And with the public support for this administration plummeting after 18 months of the public watching the chaos, the brutality, the overreach, the grifting, and yes, skyrocketing cost of living, intimidating voters apparently is the last card they have left to play as they desperately try to hold on to power after the midterm elections. But Democrats will not allow that to happen. The right to vote is the very foundation of every other right that we hold dear, and we're going to protect it. Let's pass the Protect Our Polls Act. And now I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague from my neighboring state of Arizona, Senator Ruben Gallego.
Thank you. Thank you. A swing state. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. And unfortunately, I was here on the floor of January 6th on the House side, trying to protect Arizona's electoral decision which was being contested by Republicans and by Donald Trump without any proof, obviously, of electoral fraud, and then the violence that came upon us. And I was one of the last members of Congress to leave the floor that day. Even before that, I'm a very proud Marine, served in the United States Marine Corps in Iraq. And one of the things I'm very proud of is that I served to protect the Constitution of the United States and our democracy. I swore that oath. And the last thing any Marine, sailor, Army, Coastie, Air Force, spacemen, whatever they call them nowadays, wants to do is to undermine that. You know, we're here to protect democracy. We're not here to undermine democracy. Secondarily, when you start sending our military to the polls, when you start sending our military to do civilian enforcement of some sort, you're going to undermine the support of the military. We're no longer going to be the most trusted entity in this country, according to voters and according to everyday Americans. We're going to be seen as partisan. And this is not something that we are just thinking about. It's something that we've seen across the country, across the world, I should say. In many parts of the world where the military has been used to suppress their local citizenry, to turn over elections, to actually take ballots, that has happened. What you have seen is plummeting support for the armed services, where the armed services now becomes akin to being part of a partisan political party instead of being there for service to your country. And so I find it very scary that in all attempts that we've had to pen in this opportunity of abuse, that the Republicans have blocked it. And we're not exaggerating about the threats. Right now in Maricopa County, we have ICE investigators are investigating the 2020 election. We've seen Donald Trump repeatedly say that he wants to investigate 2020 elections. They're opening up investigations all over this country. Georgia, as of late, also. They sent the former DNI down there, Tulsi Gabbard. Now they're trying to appoint a partisan DNI who does not have the policy or experience background to actually be the DNI in order for them to further push more conspiracy theories. And so on and on and on, every day Donald Trump is proving that he has a plan. And given the opportunity, he will try to use whatever levers of government, whether it's the military or other police forces, in order for him to stay power and to not be held accountable by the voters. So this bill is important. It's important for our democracy, and it's also important for the safety of our military members, and I'm very proud to support it. Thank you.
Happy to take some questions if there's any questions. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I know Senator Padilla just stated that it's already illegal for aliens to vote in American elections, but in the state of California, I mean, you don't even need a photo ID to vote. You can vote with a gym membership. If there are no illegals voting in American elections, like Democrats repeatedly claim, then why would military or law enforcement be problematic at polling locations?
Well, I don't know if you want to address the California.
Well, let me just address the military side of this, because it's illegal already. So we have a law that says you cannot have military seize, be a polling place or seize ballots. It's illegal. Number two, as I just stated, when you have the military involved in this type of partisanship and this type of essentially abuse by the president or by any president, you're actually going to deteriorate the power of the military. It's no longer going to be a nonpartisan organization that our civilians are always going to trust. It's going to end up being a partisan organization. This time it'll be Republican, maybe next time it'll be a Democrat. But what you're going to end up seeing is more and more the public saying, I don't want my kids to join the military because it's just going to be used to go after citizens that are just trying to vote. That's why you do it.
And can I just say, as we have been reviewing the so-called Save America Act, we've been privy to a lot of very in-depth reviews of voting in states like Utah, where they did a thorough review, in Louisiana, looking at the registration lists and finding next to zero instances of people who were not U.S. citizens trying to participate or successfully participating in elections. So there's an exaggerated sort of conspiracy out there, in my view, of meant to justify bringing in ICE or bringing in National Guard, which will only serve to intimidate and eligible voters. And we just can't allow that to happen. But I would recommend that people really, who want to be informed about this, look at how incredibly rare it is for somebody to endeavor to register to vote if they're not a U.S. citizen, or to actually, once registered, if that were to happen. It's so incredibly rare. And the intimidation impact would really not be insignificant. It would lead to lots of eligible voters deciding not to cast their ballot. So I just think it's really important that you look very closely at the data that is out there.
Yes, sir.
You mentioned the NDA process
Yeah.
already, and failed efforts there. Obviously, you're going to need 60 on the floor at some point. Is there another opportunity as this gets closer to the floor to keep pushing for this?
There certainly, as you know, with the NDA process, you try in committee. There's floor amendments, so I think there's plenty of opportunity, both now and probably before final passage, likely in December, to reattack. We're trying to obviously do it before the November elections, and again tried to do it in a bipartisan way through what is typically a very bipartisan process, which is the NDAA markup of the Senate Armed Services Committee. But all three amendments went down with a partisan vote, so we felt the need to do it now. Certainly, there are more and more members of the Republican side of the aisle, particularly those who have lost their elections, who are being more willing to push back on Donald Trump. And so I think that there's room for growth on the co-sponsorship list. Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for doing this.
You bet.
I'm curious, I know that this bill is to, address the November elections and protect the polls, but I'm curious how the president's constant urgings of Republicans to pass the Save America Act has kind of affected the legislative process. How has it made it harder for you all to work with your Republican colleagues on issues where there may be some bipartisan consensus in the public? Because it seems as though every piece of legislation that could move forward, the president is asking to attach a piece of, legislation that you all oppose and say would be bad for your constituents. I'm wondering if you can speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the president, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that the president is obsessed with the fact that he lost the 2020 election, and he's telling us every opportunity he has that he is trying to change the outcome of the 2026 elections. Like, you don't have to guess, right? And I give credit to my Republican colleagues who have been resisting what they understand to be a very bad bill, particularly bad for married women in this country, would disenfranchise huge numbers, millions and millions of married women. But I think there are plenty of places where we could move bipartisan bills forward, things that just make sense, that should be passing unanimously. But because the president is trying to dictate and get this done under the wire, he's affecting things. Because he can't get the SAVE Act done, he's now turned to the Postmaster General and the post office folks and tried to say, well, you can't vote by mail unless I approve it. And the Postmaster General approves it. So he's trying and bobbing and weaving every way he can. And certainly there's probably 30 pieces of legislation we can come up with today that would be bipartisan, ready to go. But the president is trying to dictate what he wants to swing the outcome of the elections. You bet. Joey.
Thank you, Senator. You previously caught the attention of the president for urging troops to resist illegal orders. I'm wondering if this doesn't pass and the president does direct troops to go to polling sites. Do you have a message to the troops of what they should do?
I mean, I think, look, I stand by the video that myself and Senator Mark Kelly and others made in November. We were quite literally quoting the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Right now, it is illegal for uniformed military to seize ballots or voting machines. It's illegal. And actually, it's one of the few places in law where individual soldiers can be held personally liable with up to 5 years in prison. So it's already enormous risk if the president sends troops in against the law. Those individual troops that are taking those ballots and machines can be prosecuted individually. Very rare in our. So my message to the troops is go with your training. your training from the very beginning when you start service is that if you are asked to do something illegal, you have a responsibility to push back, to go speak to your local JAG officer and get guidance when you need it. And that goes for whether you're prosecuting things down in South America, in the Middle East, or whether you're in uniform and being sent into the United States, claiming to be involved in protecting our polls. Ask those tough questions. That's what the training calls you to do. So I stand by that message, and I think there is nothing more important, I think, in my job in protecting our democracy. And we're putting this out there and being so clear about it now so that there's no question that if the president tries to do this and tries to send ICE or the uniformed military into our polls, that the American public is immunized against that idea. And if the president feels like there's such a threat, right, that he needs to send in the uniformed military for the first time in our history, come to Congress and show your work. Show your math. Explain to us what's such a threat that we didn't need to send in uniformed military after 9/11. Or during World War II, in the middle of world wars, we managed to help hold our democracy. We have every ability to do that now. And our uniformed military do not want to be sent into their own states, their own communities, to do something illegal, and they shouldn't. Any last question? Okay, thanks, everybody.